These are the melting point determinations for the lab called determining bond type. First crystal we're going to look at is crystal number 1. So you'll want to record crystal 1 on your lab sheet. You can do that either digitally if you receive this lab sheet from our website or on the hard copy. First crystal is a ribbon-looking kind of brownish gray, brown, gold-colored ribbon, and we'll put that in the flame. It didn't melt immediately. I'm seeing that the flame is turning yellow, still no melting, and sitting in the flame for a while, it's still yellow, so that's a pretty high melting point. It's not melting when the flame's yellow. Crystal number 2 is a white granular solid. That melted pretty quickly. The flame hasn't turned yellow yet, and basically within 2 seconds that started melting. That's a pretty low melting point. Notice in all these test tubes it's just the solid. I didn't add any water. We're just using the test tube to hold the solid into the flame. This is crystal number 3, also a white granular solid. Not seeing any melting yet. Okay, the flame just turned yellow. Flame is still yellow. I don't see any melting. There's a popping noise, but that does not coincide with any melting. So while it's still in the flame, it's yellow. No melting for crystal number 3. Crystal number 4 is a silverish, looks kind of like a filing or shaving. In the flame, tip of that inner blue cone, so it's a hot spot of flame. Flame just turned yellow. I don't see any melting. Sitting in the yellow, flame surrounding the tube, no melting happening right now. It seems like that's a pretty high melting point. Crystal number 5 is a very fine white powder. Looks like something's starting to happen. Kind of happened right when the flame started to turn yellow, so maybe right before or right when the flame turned yellow, looks like the crystal started to melt. Crystal number 6 is a large single blue crystal. So in the flame, test tube's turning yellow. Noise is occurring. I don't see any melting. And the crystal's starting to go from a white to a blue to a white, but I don't see the crystal actually melting. And it's in the yellow flame right now, so no melting, yellow flame. Melting point's pretty high. This is crystal number 7. It's a fine gray solid, not very shiny. In the test tube and in the Bunsen burner flame, the flame just turned yellow. I don't see any melting. Sitting in the flame, still yellow, no melting. Seems as if this crystal has a relatively high melting. You can use these times in which the flame turns yellow or if the crystal melts right away to come up with a range of melting points. Your lab sheet says if it's immediately melting, that's less than 100. Before the flame turns yellow, the melting point would be 100 to 300. after yellow if the substance melts. It's greater than 300, and if you don't have any melting, to label it as greater than 500. But also we could use relative terms like low, medium, high to very high. Hard to tell on some of these, but that can be helpful. So this is crystal number 8. It was a larger, coarse granule, kind of greenish color. And I see that there's some water condensing on the sides of the test tube, but the test tube's turning yellow, or the flame's turning yellow around the test tube, and no melting of that crystal. This is crystal number 9. This is a larger granule, kind of an opaque, almost white. Put that in the test tube, and put that in the Bunsen burner. As soon as I put that in the Bunsen burner, I started to have a liquid in that test tube. So that melted immediately. This is crystal number 10. It's a single crystal in that test tube. It's cylinder shaped. It's see-through, clear and colorless crystal. So in the flame's starting to turn yellow. I don't see any melting. No melting right now. Flame's yellow, still no melting. It looks like that substance isn't going to melt. At least it won't melt in our Bunsen burner. This is crystal number 11. It's a fine granular blue solid, kind of a powder. Put that in the burner flame. Okay, so immediately in the flame, no melting. Flame is just starting to turn yellow, still no melting. There's a bit of a color change to the crystal, but still no melting. Yellow flame, no melting. Okay, then the last crystal is crystal number 12. It's kind of a brownish, looks like a filing, kind of small granules. Well, the crystal's in the flame. The flame just turned yellow. Still no melting. And yeah, yellow flame, no melting. Looks like this one also has a pretty high melting point. Those were the melting point determinations for the 12 crystals of the Determining Bond Types lab.